It was January 3rd, 2012. I had spent 3 days at my boyfriend Adam's house in Lion's Head, a 500-person town 4 hours north of Toronto. After 6 months of dating, I felt good about my third solid visit with his friends and family. As I said my thank yous and goodbyes, I got into my mom's 7-year-old red Hyundai Santa Fe, which had reindeer antlers coming out the sides and a red Rudolph nose on the front bumper. I was headed home to Toronto. Adam started up his car and I began to follow him in mine. I immediately put Lady Gaga's Born This Way CD on and began performing lip syncs to all of my guilty pleasures. As I began driving, I noticed that the roads were covered with lots of snow. It was also very windy out, so it was hard to see anything, including Adam's car ahead of me. While I could sense my chronic anxiety creeping up on me, I forced myself to suppress it and overcome it by focusing on the road and the lyrics of Gaga's summer banger, The Edge of Glory. About 20 minutes into the drive, the wind grew stronger and the snow became thicker. Adam's car had become nothing but a black dot in the distance. Out of nowhere, I hit a sheet of black ice and lost complete control of my vehicle. Keeping my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, and wrongfully trying to steer my way back into the proper lane, I realized that Highway 6 was about to take me on a tragic ride. I swerved into the lane of oncoming traffic and then back into my lane. At that moment, an orange pickup truck zoomed by in the lane of oncoming traffic. As my mom's car veered uncontrollably back into the lane of oncoming traffic and continued to skid toward the deep ditch at the side of the highway, I remember whispering to myself, "You're about to get really hurt." I remember Gaga's voice fading out and all other sounds turning off. I wrapped my arms around my head and leaned over to hug the passenger seat. As my hearing came back, I heard a massive boom as the car landed on the driver's side and the entire driver's window shattered on top of me. At that moment, I realized I had survived and I felt no pain. I opened the passenger's door and lifted myself out of the car as if I were doing a chin-up. The only gas station for 10 kilometers either way was located directly across the road. In my t-shirt and track pants, I walked across the snow-covered highway. Once across, I looked back at the car and realized that my mother was no longer the owner of a seasonally ornamented Hyundai Santa Fe. I also noticed a trail of blood. I looked down at my arm and saw many deep wounds, including one that looked as though Freddy Krueger had slashed me with his claws. I broke down in tears. I tried to enter the hamlet of Mars gas station, but it was locked, so I banged on the door until a 50-year-old woman appeared. She looked at me in shock and screamed, "Holy fuck, honey!" over and over again. In a panic, she retrieved a putrid-smelling, moldy-looking rag from the back and began wrapping my bloody wounds. As she did this, I saw Adam sprinting over to the car that was totaled in the ditch. I ran out of the gas station and called his name. As he turned around, his muscles unclenched, and he sprinted over to me and hugged me tighter than any best friend or boyfriend had ever held me. Then, I turned to the woman behind me and looked at her. "I want a hug from a woman," I sobbed. She reciprocated with a motherly embrace. Rather than calling an ambulance, Adam escorted me out of the gas station and into his car. As I assured Adam that I did not need to go to the hospital, he ignored my typical stubborn behavior and began driving south to the Wyerton General. Once there, the prospect of having to get a needle driven into my wounded skin brought me to a new level of hysteria. As a chubby, blonde-haired nurse escorted me into an operating room, I pleaded for her to get me something to soothe my worry of needles. Eventually, she gave in to my obnoxious beggary and brought me an Ativan. Once under the influence, the shock of the accident faded and the pain became noticeable. At this point, the only gay doctor in Wyerton happened to enter the room to stitch me up. Right behind Dr. Carter came Adam's mom and Cozy, Adam's family friend who happened to be a gay police officer. With 50 milligrams of Ativan in my system, a gay all-star team in the room, and my beautiful boyfriend Adam holding my hand, I was semi-prepared for the anesthetic. To prepare myself even more, I forced Adam to read aloud the Wikipedia page for Real Housewives of Orange County. As the needle entered my bleeding skin, Adam quizzed me about Vicki Gunvalson's different career choices in plastic surgeries. Meanwhile, the rest of the team either laughed or held their breath for the melodramatic spectacle to come to an end. 17 stitches later, the entire crew and I headed for Jamaican jerk chicken at one of the only restaurants in Wyerton. After that, Adam and I drove home to Toronto, where my mom was waiting as she liberally sipped a whiskey on the rocks and had a giant roast beef meal on the table.